Many people believe that speaking eloquently and frequently will win the favor of others. However, the ancients taught the opposite. The more a person speaks, the harder it is to win people's hearts. Those who maintain virtue and speak little are more likely to gain trust and respect. If you are looking for a more sustainable path to building relationships, stay with this video and subscribe to the Simple Philosophy channel to learn together how to live more profoundly and steadfastly. The ancients understood very well that people's hearts are not in their ears, but in their eyes and in the passage of time. Others don't believe you because you speak well, but because they see you live righteously. When words exceed actions, credibility begins to crumble. Conversely, when words are few and deeds are many, each small action becomes the most convincing evidence. That is the first principle of winning people's hearts. Use actions instead of promises. The second principle is consistency. If you're one way today and another way tomorrow, even if you're telling the truth, it's hard to gain trust. The ancients taught that a consistent person inspires confidence in others. No need for lengthy explanations. Just be consistent from beginning to end. People naturally prefer stability and dislike uncertainty. The next principle is knowing how to listen. Talkative people often only listen to themselves. Those who speak less leave room for others to speak. When someone feels listened to, they naturally open up. Silence at the right time is sometimes the greatest gift for a relationship. The ancients also emphasized the importance of keeping one's word. A promise, however small, must be kept. There's no need to say grand things. Simply fulfilling small tasks will build trust and confidence in you over time, without requiring further proof. Another important principle is to avoid ostentation. Those who boast often lack substance. Those with substance are quiet and unassuming. The ancients believed that profound virtue naturally brings authority. Authority doesn't need to be spoken. Others can sense it. Furthermore, it's about knowing when to yield. It's not about being weak, but about understanding that temporary victories and defeats won't change people's hearts in the long run. Those who know when to step back often go further. Winning hearts and minds isn't about communication skills, but about cultivating inner peace. When your heart is upright, your words naturally carry weight. When your heart is sincere, even silence is enough to persuade. This video will continue to share the full 14 principles that our ancestors have distilled through hundreds of years of experience with humanity. If you want your relationships to be more enduring, deeper, and more peaceful, please listen until the end and subscribe to the Simple Philosophy channel to learn together how to live wisely among people. 1. Winning hearts and minds begins with subtle cultivation. The ancients said that virtue is the root. Words are merely the branches. This concise statement contains a profound principle about how people build credibility and influence in life. Many people today focus on learning how to speak eloquently, skillfully, and persuasively. But the ancients looked directly at the essence. Words are only the surface. The true root lies in the inner qualities of each person. Self-cultivation begins with self-improvement. Ancient sages believed that if one's character is not upright, even the most eloquent words will soon be exposed by time. Listeners may initially be swayed by words, but over time they will observe the speaker's lifestyle, behavior, and approach to self-interest. When words do not match actions, trust erodes quickly. Therefore, the ancients taught that to win people's hearts, one must first ask oneself whether one has lived righteously, fulfilled one's duties, and upheld moral principles. In the ancients' view, virtue was not something abstract or unattainable. Virtue is manifested in small things, such as keeping promises, not speaking ill of others behind their backs, and not harming others for personal gain. Virtue also includes self-control, restraining desires, knowing when to stop, and prioritizing the common good over personal ego. When a person is virtuous, they don't need to say much, because their way of life is the clearest testament to their virtue. Ancient sages observed people's hearts very carefully and realized that people don't trust fleeting words, but rather enduring ones. A person might say something right once or twice, but if their behavior is inconsistent, trust cannot last. Conversely, a person who speaks little but consistently adheres to clear principles will gradually earn natural respect. This respect doesn't need to be forced or persuaded. It forms quietly over the years. Self-cultivation also means reflecting on oneself every day. Ancient people considered self-reflection the foundation of all lasting relationships. When conflicts arose, they didn't rush to blame others, but instead asked themselves if they had fulfilled their role and acted appropriately. People capable of self-reflection tend to cause fewer conflicts and hurt others less. This makes them trustworthy and well-liked. Another important aspect of self-cultivation is humility. Ancient wisdom holds that the more virtuous a person is, the less they should show off. Humility is not about lowering oneself, but about understanding one's own limitations. Those who know their shortcomings will always maintain a learning attitude. In communication, they neither impose their will nor compete for superiority. This attitude makes others feel safe and respected, naturally drawing people's hearts towards them. Ancient wisdom also emphasizes that self-cultivation is a long-term process, not a spur-of-the-moment endeavor. One cannot live a virtuous life merely to please others and then become complacent. Human nature is highly sensitive to hypocrisy. Others may not express it, but they can clearly sense the inconsistencies or contradictions within you. Therefore, self-cultivation must become a way of life, not a strategy. According to ancient wisdom, words should only be the branches. When the roots are strong, the branches will naturally flourish. A virtuous person speaks little, but each word carries weight. Listeners don't need much analysis to feel trust. Conversely, a person lacking roots, the more they speak, the more likely they are to reveal their insecurity and desire for validation. This principle holds true in all relationships, whether family, work, or social. A leader earns the respect of subordinates, not through commands or speeches, but through fairness and exemplary conduct. A friend earns trust, not through promises, but through timely presence and consistent actions. A person who wants lasting affection earns it not through sweet words, but through sincerity and responsibility. The ancients taught that when virtue is sufficient, there is no need to seek people's favor. Others will come to you naturally. When virtue is insufficient, even if you seek it, it will only be temporary. This is a major difference between the ancients' perspective and many modern views. The ancients did not seek to control others, but focused on perfecting themselves. They understood that people's hearts are like water. They flow to the lowest point. Virtue is that low point. Self-cultivation also helps people stand firm in the face of praise and criticism. A virtuous person does not become arrogant because of praise, nor does they become distraught because of criticism. This steadfastness creates a very special energy that inspires trust in others. In a world full of changes, a steadfast person is always a natural anchor for people's hearts. When we deeply understand this principle, we will no longer be overly concerned with what to say to please others. Instead, we will focus on living a righteous and fulfilling life. Each day, we correct a bad habit, keep a small promise, and do a kind deed quietly. These things accumulate into virtue. And when virtue is sufficient, even words spoken may not be numerous, yet they carry weight. Winning hearts and minds is therefore not an art of communication, but the result of a process of self-cultivation. A person who cultivates themselves well is like a tree with deep roots. Even strong winds cannot shake them. Others will naturally develop trust and respect for them. This is the most sustainable way to win hearts and minds. A principle that our ancestors have compiled and passed down to posterity. If you want to continue exploring such profound principles, follow the Simple Philosophy channel. Each video is a small glimpse that helps us see more clearly the path to living wisely among people. 2. Those who talk a lot often reveal their inner selves. Those who speak little tend to hold more weight in their words. This is a very subtle observation by the ancients about human nature. In daily life, we easily see that words not only convey information, but also reflect inner feelings. The way a person speaks, whether a lot or a little, the choice of words, and the timing of their speech all reveal their inner state. Ancient wisdom holds that when the mind is not at peace, the mouth cannot remain still. When the heart is filled with anxiety, worry, or desires, people tend to talk excessively to mask their inner emptiness. They speak to assert themselves, to persuade others, and to seek validation. But the more they talk, the more easily their impatience, uncertainty, and unfiltered thoughts are revealed. Listeners may initially pay attention, but over time they will become weary and lose faith. Talkative people often unintentionally reveal their true emotions. When they're overly happy, they talk excessively. When angry, they speak without restraint. When afraid, they explain at length. Each state leaves its mark on their words. Therefore, the ancients taught that to control oneself, one must first control one's words, not by forcing oneself to speak, but by calming the mind. When the mind is still agitated, words are unlikely to be wise. Conversely, those who speak little are not thoughtless, but rather accustomed to considering their words before speaking. They understand that every word they utter carries responsibility. Therefore, they choose silence when unnecessary and only speak when their words are truly useful. This selective approach gives their words weight. When they do speak, others tend to listen more carefully, knowing that their words are not spoken carelessly. Ancient sages observed that the weight of words lies not in quantity, but in relevance. A well-timed statement can be worth 1,000 ill-timed words. Those who speak little often possess keen observational skills. They listen and observe extensively, understanding the context before speaking. As a result, their words are usually direct, concise, and avoid causing offense. People who speak little are also better at keeping secrets and maintaining discretion. This is extremely important in relationships. Talkative people are more likely to blurt out things they shouldn't, hurting others or damaging their own reputation. The ancients taught that those who keep their mouths shut protect themselves. When you don't easily reveal your thoughts, feelings, and plans, you are less likely to be taken advantage of and less likely to fall into disadvantageous situations. Another insightful point is that quiet people often make others feel safe. They don't impose their opinions, don't dominate the conversation, and don't turn it into a display of ego. This calmness creates a sense of trust. The other person feels respected and is more likely to open up. As a result, people's hearts gradually lean towards quiet people. Ancient wisdom also warns that talking too much easily leads to mistakes. Words, once spoken, cannot be taken back. A thoughtless remark can ruin a relationship built over many years. People who speak little are more cautious and therefore make fewer mistakes with their words. They understand that silence is sometimes the best way to protect both themselves and others. The ancients didn't advise people to become withdrawn or cold. Speaking little doesn't mean being distant. Speaking little means speaking truthfully, sufficiently, and responsibly. When comfort is needed, they still speak. When advice is needed, they still speak. But their words stem from sincerity, not from a need to show off. This is what gives their words lasting weight. In the workplace, talkative people may make a good first impression, but those who are less talkative are often trusted with important tasks. This is because they don't make empty promises, don't overstate their abilities, and don't create unrealistic expectations. When they agree to something, others know they will do their best to see it through. Their words therefore carry increasing weight. The same applies to personal life. People who speak little tend to remain calm in the face of praise or criticism. They don't rush to explain themselves when misunderstood, nor do they boast when praised. This composure makes others observe them longer, and once they understand, their respect deepens. Ancient wisdom teaches that words are the gateway to fortune and misfortune. Knowing how to speak is wisdom, but knowing not to speak is true cultivation. When people learn to control their speech, they are also learning to manage their inner selves. The calmer the mind, the fewer words one speaks, and the fewer words one speaks, the more valuable each word becomes. Those who talk a lot reveal their minds because their minds are not yet organized. Those who speak little maintain the weight of their words because their minds are already in order. This is not a communication technique, but the result of inner training. When we understand this, we will no longer strive to speak eloquently, but instead focus on living a stable life. And when we need to speak, our words will naturally carry weight. If you are on a journey to learn how to live more deeply among people, continue to follow the philosophy of simplicity. The teachings of our ancestors, though simple, are enough to illuminate how we interact with others in life today. Those who rush to speak often do so out of inner insecurity. Lacking confidence in their own worth, they try to compensate with words. They explain, justify, and direct excessively. Their ultimate goal isn't necessarily to help others understand, but rather to maintain control. They fear that if they don't speak, remind, or pressure, things will go against their wishes. This fear causes their words to become frantic and forceful. Wise and virtuous people understand that everyone has their own karma and their own path. They don't try to change others. They know that the more they interfere, the more likely they are to create conflict. Instead, they choose to live honestly, consistently, and persistently. When others need help, they are ready to assist. When others are not ready, they patiently wait. Ancient wisdom emphasizes that external control only creates temporary order. Virtue creates lasting stability. When a person is virtuous, they don't need close monitoring. Others will adjust themselves naturally, unwilling to betray trust. This is a form of soft power that words cannot replace. Ancient people considered maintaining virtue a higher form of wisdom than engaging in debate. While debate aims at winning or losing, maintaining virtue aims at maintaining relationships. Someone who seeks victory through words might win a conversation but lose the relationship. A person who maintains virtue might remain silent in a dispute, but ultimately wins people's hearts in the long run. Living by this principle will reduce fatigue. There's no need to constantly explain or prove anything. Just ask yourself if you've done the right thing today, if you've lived honestly, and if you've kept your word. If the answer is yes, then you don't need to worry too much about what others think. Good intentions may come slowly, but they will come surely. Our ancestors left us a very practical lesson. The greatest control lies not in words, but in character. A person with strong character needs no control over anyone. They are like a central axis. Everything around them revolves naturally, without coercion. Understanding this will gradually reduce our need to speak truthfully and win. We learn to listen more, do more, and let results speak for themselves. This change, though subtle, forms the foundation for deep and lasting relationships. If you're looking for a lighter yet more stable way of living among people, continue to follow the philosophy of simplicity. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss out on ancient wisdom that helps us live wisely, without fanfare, yet powerful enough to touch people's hearts. For eloquent words only create a short-lived impression. Virtue builds lasting trust. This is a truth that our ancestors recognized very early on. In life, people are often attracted by fluent, coherent, and pleasant speech. A person who speaks well can quickly win favor at first sight. But our ancestors understood that the initial impression is only a thin layer. What determines whether a relationship will last is virtue. Words are as captivating as a flash of light. They attract attention, create interest, and momentarily make others open up. But that light fades quickly if not nurtured by actions and character. When words are not reinforced by deeds, listeners will gradually feel empty and disappointed. The ancients called this words without a foundation. Virtue is different. It is not loud, ostentatious, or needing a display. Virtue is shown in how a person treats the vulnerable when no one is watching. It is shown in how they keep their word when it means them suffering a loss. It is shown in how they choose what is right even when it is difficult. These things don't create an immediate impression, but they quietly accumulate trust. Ancient sages recognized that human nature is very subtle. People can be swayed by words for a short time, but they will base their decision on whether to trust or not on actions. A person who speaks eloquently but acts inconsistently will make others wary. Conversely, a person who speaks little but acts regularly and consistently will inspire confidence. This confidence is the foundation of all lasting relationships. In everyday communication, kind words are often used to create goodwill. However, the ancients did not deny the value of words. They only emphasized that words must follow virtue. When virtue is insufficient and words are excessive, a distance will inevitably arise. Listeners will begin to compare words and actions. When they see a discrepancy, trust will erode rapidly. Virtue inspires trust because it is consistent. A virtuous person remains the same today as they are tomorrow. They don't change their attitude for short-term gain. It is this stability that makes others dare to rely on them. In a world of constant change, stability of character is invaluable. The ancients also taught that trust cannot be borrowed. No one can borrow trust with words and then repay it later with actions. Trust is only formed when others observe for a sufficient amount of time and in sufficient quantity. Virtue is like compound interest. Every small, right action contributes a little to the account of trust. Over time, that balance grows large and stable. In the workplace, a good speaker can give a good presentation and quickly persuade clients. But it is those with integrity who are entrusted with important tasks. They not only complete their assignments, but also maintain responsibility to the end. When faced with difficulties, they don't blame others, but seek solutions. This trustworthiness makes them a long-term pillar of support for the team. The same applies to friendship. Sweet words can move someone's heart for a moment, but only those who are always there to keep each other's secrets and don't leave when things get tough can create a lasting friendship. The ancients understood that feelings don't live by promises, but by presence. In a family, kind words can diffuse an argument, but it is virtue that sustains lasting harmony. A person who knows how to be patient, admit mistakes, and put the common good above their own ego will create a sense of security for those around them. This security is the root of family happiness. Ancient wisdom also warns that placing too much faith in eloquent words can easily lead people astray. A person who speaks well but lacks virtue can mislead others into making wrong decisions. Therefore, the ancients always advised observing carefully how someone lives before placing trust in them. Words should only be considered as a reference, while actions are the true evidence. Virtue doesn't need to be publicized. When someone constantly talks about their kindness, it shows they lack the very thing they're talking about. Truly virtuous people are often reluctant to mention their virtues. They let others experience them for themselves over time. This is the big difference between image builders and value builders. A crucial point is that virtue creates trust, even in the absence of others. People believe you'll do the right thing even when no one is watching. This is the highest level of trust. Kind words cannot create this. Only a history of actions and character can. When we deeply understand this, we will stop chasing after what sounds good and focus on living righteously. Each day, uphold a small principle. Don't lie, don't break promises, and don't harm others. These seemingly small things are the foundation of lasting credibility. When the foundation is strong enough, words will naturally carry weight. Ancient people believed that virtuous individuals were like an underground stream, quiet yet nourishing an entire region. Those who spoke well but lacked virtue were like a sudden downpour, noisy but fleeting. Ultimately, people will choose a place where they can find lasting refuge. If you're looking for ways to build trust, not just in a single encounter, but throughout a lifetime, consider this. Focus less on making a quick impression and invest more in inner qualities. It's the slow but steady path our ancestors took and left for us. If you find these philosophies helpful for your life journey and interpersonal relationships, please subscribe to the Simple Philosophy channel. Each video is a small lesson to help us build lasting values and live more confidently among people. 5. The ancients taught that to gain others' trust, one must first be trustworthy in small things. This is a very practical principle, yet it is often overlooked. Many people aspire to great trust, great support, and great status. But the ancients did the opposite. They started with very small, ordinary, and quiet things. Because they understood that people's hearts are not built on grand promises, but accumulated from countless small, correct actions repeated over and over. People are often easily swayed by promises that sound appealing. However, ancient wisdom shows that the bigger the promise, the harder it is to keep. Failing to keep it results not only in broken promises, but also in a loss of trust. Therefore, the ancients taught that instead of making big promises, one should complete small tasks. When small tasks are completed successfully, others will feel confident that larger tasks can also be entrusted to you. Trustworthiness in small matters is first and foremost demonstrated in attitude. When undertaking a task, whether large or small, a virtuous person performs it with the same seriousness. They don't differentiate whether anyone is watching or not, or whether it brings direct benefit or not. This consistency creates a sense of security for those around them. Others know that you won't do things carelessly just because it's a small task. Ancient wisdom holds that the human heart is like a scale. Each small, righteous act is a weight placed on it. Initially, the difference may not be apparent, but when enough weights are placed on the scale, trust will tip decisively in one direction. Conversely, each broken promise, each act of betrayal, however small, is a scratch. Many small scratches combined will shatter trust. History is full of stories that illustrate this point. There was a minor official in ancient times who wasn't particularly eloquent. He lacked rhetorical skills and didn't often make flowery promises. But he was renowned for his fair and transparent approach to work. When handling matters, he always adhered to the principle of never showing favoritism due to personal connections and never changing decisions under pressure. The people under his authority did not heed his grand pronouncements. They quietly observed how he handled each small matter. A land dispute he handled fairly. A tax collection case, he prevented fraud. A minor appointment, he chose a capable person, not someone with connections. Each such action took place in silence, yet left a profound mark. Gradually, people no longer needed to hear his promises. Just seeing what he did was enough. When they faced difficulties, they sought him out. When false rumors spread, they stood up to defend him. This support didn't come from appeals, but from trust built up over time. That is the power of being trustworthy in the smallest things. Ancient people highly valued trustworthiness. But trustworthiness is not just about words, it's about concrete actions. Keeping one's word means arriving on time, doing one's job properly, and not shirking responsibility. These things may sound ordinary, but they are the foundation of all lasting relationships. Those who maintain trustworthiness in small matters will need less proof when undertaking larger tasks. In modern life, this principle remains perfectly true. A colleague who consistently completes tasks on time, even small ones, will eventually be entrusted with more important responsibilities. A friend who always keeps their promises, even for trivial matters, will become a trusted confidant. A leader who maintains fairness in even minor decisions will build greater trust within the team. The ancients taught that one should not underestimate small things, for small things are where character is most clearly revealed. In the dark, without the spotlight, people reveal their true nature. Only those who act correctly in such circumstances are trustworthy. People are very sensitive to this. Even if they don't say it, they sense it very well. Another profound point is that being trustworthy in small things helps people build self-confidence. When we do these small things well each day, we create a solid inner foundation. We don't need to worry too much about image or judgment. This stability radiates outward and makes others feel secure. Ancient wisdom doesn't advise building trust through strategies. Instead, it suggests living in a way that leaves no room for shame in every action. When you live that way, trust will come naturally. It may be slow, but it's solid. It may not be flashy, but it's enduring. The story of that minor official shows that you don't need exceptional eloquence to win people's hearts. What's needed is fairness, integrity, and consistency in every small matter. When those qualities are upheld, even few words carry weight. In fact, you don't need to say much for others to readily follow you. If you want to build credibility at work, at home, or in any relationship, start with the smallest things. Keep small promises, fulfill small responsibilities, and behave kindly in situations where no one forces you to. That is the path our ancestors took to create lasting trust. If you find these lessons valuable for your life journey, please subscribe to the Simple Philosophy channel. Each video is a story, a principle that helps us understand ourselves and others, and live more confidently among people. 6. A trustworthy person doesn't need much explanation. Once trust is broken, 1,000 words are useless. This is a very straightforward teaching from the ancients about the value of trust. In life, people often think that when mistakes occur, a thorough explanation and eloquent words can compensate for them. But the ancients looked deeper. They understood that trust doesn't operate according to the logic of words, but according to the memory of actions. Trustworthiness is the foundation of all relationships. Without trustworthiness, friendships are not lasting, partnerships are short-lived, and people cannot find support. Those who maintain trustworthiness over time create a very clear image in the hearts of others, an image of reliability. When they speak, others believe them immediately without questioning or further verification. This trust isn't because they speak eloquently, but because they have proven themselves sufficiently over time. The ancients taught that once trust is established, explanations become superfluous. Others understand that you will do your part correctly, even before you have a chance to say it. If there is a delay, they believe it is a legitimate reason. If there is a mistake, they believe you will correct it yourself. This trust allows the relationship to function smoothly, without suspicion or tension. Conversely, a single act of dishonesty can be extremely destructive. Just one instance of breaking a promise, one promise not to keep, or one instance of doing something different from what was said, can cast doubt on the entire reputation built up beforehand. Others will begin to doubt not only your specific actions, but also your character. This is something that the ancients strongly warned against. When trust is broken, people often try to explain. They talk more, justify more, recount the circumstances, reasons, and difficulties. But the more they talk, the harder it is to regain trust. This is because the listener is no longer listening with their ears, but with the memory of that betrayal. Every word is scrutinized through the crack that has already formed. The ancients understood that trust is like a mirror. Once broken, even if you try to put it back together, the damage will remain. Therefore, they placed keeping their word above all else. They would rather not promise than promise, and not keep their promise. They would rather take on the difficult task first, than let others down later. This is not rigidity, but a clear understanding of the consequences of losing credibility. People who keep their word are usually very careful with their speech. They don't easily agree or make promises hastily. When they speak, they have considered their capabilities and responsibilities. This caution gives their words weight. Others don't need to hear much. Just one sentence is enough. In the workplace, those who keep their word are entrusted with important tasks, not because they are the best, but because they are the most trustworthy. When you entrust tasks to them, others don't need to constantly monitor or remind them. This peace of mind is invaluable. A single breach of trust in the workplace can collapse a long-term partnership, even if it has been successful many times before. The same applies to personal life. A trustworthy friend doesn't need constant proof of their affection. Simply being punctual and not abandoning someone when needed is enough. Conversely, a single broken promise at a crucial moment renders all subsequent apologies meaningless. The ancients didn't say mistakes can't be corrected, but they emphasized that the price to pay will be very high. A profound point in this teaching is that the ancients did not advise people to try to regain trust through words. They advised regaining trust through quiet and persistent actions. When trust is lost, don't rush to speak. Act. Do it silently and consistently, accepting that it will take a very long time for others to regain trust. This is the only way. Those who keep their word from the start will avoid that difficult path. They don't need to explain much, because their actions speak for themselves. When misunderstandings arise, they don't panic. When doubted, they remain calm and continue to do what is right. This composure further strengthens trust in others. Ancient wisdom teaches that trustworthiness is not only about keeping promises to others, but also to oneself. When a person easily breaks a principle they have established in life, they become accustomed to breaking promises. Over time, this breach of trust not only affects others, but also weakens their own inner self. A person who cannot trust themselves will find it difficult to gain the trust of others. Keeping your word in small, everyday matters is the best way to protect yourself from major breaches of trust. Arriving on time, fulfilling your responsibilities, speaking truthfully about your abilities, and daring to refuse requests when unsure. These things may seem simple, but they form the strongest foundation for long-term credibility. Our ancestors left us a very clear reminder: never trade trustworthiness for temporary convenience. Because what is lost is not just an opportunity, but also the trust of others. When trustworthiness is maintained, words have value. When trustworthiness is lost, words are merely sounds. If you want to build lasting relationships and earn the genuine trust of others, start by keeping your word every day. Speak less, promise more firmly, and fulfill your promises. That is the slow but steady path that our ancestors pointed out. If you find these philosophies helpful in giving you a clearer perspective on how to live and be a better person, please subscribe to the Simple Philosophy channel. Each video is a small lesson that helps us uphold our values and go further in the hearts of others. 7. Winning hearts isn't about flattery. It's about not making others feel insecure when they're around you. The ancients clearly saw the true nature of long-lasting relationships. They understood that superficial friendliness or pleasant words only create temporary comfort. What truly binds people together is a sense of security. When you're with someone and your heart doesn't have to be on guard, anxious, or guessing their intentions, their heart will naturally stay. Many people confuse flattery with winning hearts. Flattery often relies on flattering words that appeal to others' emotions, timely praise, and outward concessions. These actions may bring temporary joy. However, the ancients understood that flattery is often unsustainable because it lacks a solid foundation of character stability. People who constantly try to please others often make them happy, but also make them suspicious. Today you say one thing, tomorrow you say something else. You might appear agreeable to someone's face but act differently behind their back. Even without saying it, others will gradually feel insecure. They don't know what you're really thinking. They don't know when your words are true. This insecurity is the biggest barrier to human relationships. Ancient wisdom holds that people who spend a long time together don't need excessive flattery. What they need is consistency. When a person's words and actions are consistent and unwavering, not swayed by self-interest, others will gradually relax. They won't have to be on guard or put on a show. Human nature naturally prefers simplicity and stability. Avoiding causing others anxiety begins with clarity. Virtuous people are usually very clear in their principles. They keep their word. They don't promise what they're not sure of. They are not ambiguous about their interests. This clarity helps others know where they stand. When boundaries are clear, people's hearts are at peace. Ancient people placed particular importance on a sense of security in relationships. They understood that people could tolerate losses in terms of benefits, but prolonged insecurity was extremely difficult to bear. A person who constantly makes others guess their intentions, be wary, and fear betrayal will find it hard to retain their trust. No matter how eloquent they are, people who don't make others feel insecure often share one common trait: they don't use emotions to manipulate. They don't get angry or sulk erratically. They don't use silence to pressure others. And they don't use words to make others feel guilty. They maintain composure in their interactions. This emotional stability creates a safe space for those around them. This is even more evident within families. A person who is quick-tempered or moody creates constant tension throughout the household. Everyone is unsure when to speak and when to remain silent. This insecurity gradually damages relationships. Conversely, a person who maintains composure and avoids extreme reactions will create a more peaceful family atmosphere, fostering closer bonds. The same applies to the workplace. A leader who constantly changes their mind or says one thing and does another will create unease within the team. Employees will be hesitant to take initiative for fear of disagreeing. Even if the leader tries to win favor with praise, the effect will only be short-lived. A leader who inspires confidence is one who has clear principles, handles things fairly, and keeps their word. Only when people know their efforts will be properly appreciated can they truly feel secure. The ancients taught that peace of mind is the root of trust. When you are with someone, you don't have to worry about being taken advantage of, misunderstood, or blamed. You will naturally trust them. This trust doesn't need to be declared. It is demonstrated through their behavior, their willingness to cooperate, and their courage to delegate. A very profound point is that people who don't make others feel insecure usually don't talk too much about themselves. They neither show off nor hide anything. They let others observe and feel for themselves. This naturalness creates a pleasant feeling. Others aren't forced to react or offer praise. Ancient wisdom emphasizes that to bring peace of mind to others, one must first have peace of mind oneself. Those within a turmoil often spread that turmoil to others. They are anxious, suspicious, and defensive. These emotions manifest in their words and actions. Therefore, cultivating inner peace is the foundation of winning people's hearts. When a person lives honestly and doesn't do anything underhanded, they don't need to hide anything. When they don't need to hide, they don't make others feel uneasy. This transparency creates a very strong sense of trust. Others know that no matter what the issue is, they can speak frankly without fear of ambiguous consequences. The ancients didn't advise people to try to please everyone. They knew it was impossible. They only advised living in a way that allowed others to be on guard when around you. No need to put on a role. No need to worry about intentions. Just be yourself. When you achieve that, people's hearts will naturally remain with you. Winning hearts and minds is therefore not about communication skills, but about one's state of mind. When you live right, clearly, and stably, you will become a place where others feel at ease. In a world full of turmoil, peace of mind is a rare value. Whoever can bring that value will win people's hearts and mind. If you want to build lasting, stress-free relationships, start by looking inward. Ask yourself, do others feel at peace when they are around you? If the answer is increasingly yes, then you are on the right path, as the ancients pointed out. If you find these philosophies helpful in understanding how to interact with others, please subscribe to the Simple Philosophy channel. Each video is a small step towards living more calmly and steadily, and becoming a source of reassurance for those around us. 8. Wise people always maintain boundaries. They don't become too close. They don't make excessive promises, and they don't interfere too deeply. This is a crucial principle passed down by our ancestors regarding the long-term pursuit of human trust. Many believe that to gain trust and affection, one must be extremely close, share everything, and help to the fullest extent. However, our ancestors saw a more subtle side. When boundaries are blurred, human trust not only fails to endure, but also easily leads to anxiety and weariness. Boundaries aren't about coldness. Boundaries are about clear thinking. Wise people understand that every relationship needs a sufficient distance to ensure both parties' safety. Being too close can lead to dependence. Being too close can lead to conflict. When there's no longer room to breathe, feelings of unease grow heavy without being expressed. The ancients taught that those who uphold virtue must first know how to control themselves. Controlling oneself is not only about maintaining morality, but also about maintaining one's position in relationships. When you overstep your boundaries, even with good intentions, it can easily make others uncomfortable. Wise people do not let fleeting emotions cause them to forget necessary limits. They don't get too close because they understand that people's hearts can change. Today they're close, tomorrow they might be distant. If you pour too much emotion into a relationship, you'll be easily hurt when things change. Those who maintain virtue don't put everything in one place. They value things, but don't become dependent. This calmness allows them to always maintain control and peace of mind. Not being too close helps maintain respect in relationships. When the distance is just right, each party is mindful of their words and manners. Others are less likely to be disrespectful to you. Human relationships thus remain stable. The ancients understood that respect is always a deeper foundation than emotions. Not making excessive promises is another way of setting boundaries. Wise people are very careful with their promises. They understand that each promise is a binding commitment. The more promises made, the greater the pressure. Failure to fulfill them leads to breach of trust. Therefore, they only promise what they can. Sometimes they even choose not to promise at all, quietly working instead. The ancients taught that it is better to do more than to talk a lot without fulfilling one's promises. Virtuous people do not use promises to create a false sense of security. They use consistent actions so that others can feel it for themselves. Once people become accustomed to that trustworthiness, they no longer demand promises. Not interfering too much is a very high level of wisdom in interpersonal relationships. Many people interfere out of concern, control out of worry, and impose their will out of love. But the ancients understood that each person has their own karma and lessons to learn. Over-interference deprives others of opportunities for growth and also exhausts oneself. Wise people maintain virtue by readily offering help when asked, but without forcing others to do so when they are not ready. They offer advice when necessary, but without compelling others to listen. This respect gives their words greater value. When they speak, others know it's not control, but goodwill. Maintaining boundaries is crucial within families. Parents who interfere too much in their children's lives create pressure and distance. Overly controlling spouses erode trust. The ancients didn't advise distancing, but rather understanding roles. Each person should fulfill their part and respect the others. The same applies to work. A leader who sets boundaries is someone who doesn't meddle or control every detail. They establish clear principles and then allow others to operate within those frameworks. This controlled trust helps the team develop more sustainably, and morale remains stable as a result. People who don't set boundaries often do so out of fear. Fear of loss, fear of abandonment, fear of not being recognized. These fears make them cling tightly to relationships, but the tighter they cling, the more the other person wants to leave. Ancient wisdom recognized this pattern and taught people to know when to let go. Maintaining boundaries is also a way to protect one's own virtue. When you don't interfere too deeply, you're less likely to get involved in controversies. When you don't make too many promises, you're less likely to break your word. When you don't become too close, you're less likely to be swayed by emotions. This self-preservation helps you maintain your integrity in the long run. A subtle point is that people who maintain boundaries often make others feel more secure. They don't demand, force, or intrude. Others know they can be themselves in your presence. This freedom is what makes people want to stay. The ancients taught that clear boundaries bring peace of mind. When things are ambiguous, people have to guessing intentions, feelings, and limits. This exhaustion inevitably leads to strained relationships. Conversely, when boundaries are clear, everyone knows where they stand and what they need to do. Wise people who maintain virtue are not afraid of being misunderstood as distant. They understand that time will tell. When they consistently show up at the right time to help within their capabilities and respect others' limitations, people will gradually understand. This understanding is deeper than any explanation. Winning hearts and minds is therefore not about getting too close, but about standing in the right place. It's not about giving a lot, but about giving just the right amount. When you maintain boundaries, you also maintain the stability of the relationship. This is the wisdom that our ancestors have distilled through countless experiences with human nature. If you're feeling overwhelmed by complicated and stressful relationships, try living by this principle. Be less familiar, less likely to make promises, and less likely to interfere too deeply. When you feel lighter, the people around you will feel lighter too. If you find these philosophies helpful in living a more mindful and peaceful life among people, please subscribe to the Simple Philosophy channel. Each video is a small lesson to help us maintain our virtues, preserve our integrity, and go further on the path of wise living. 9. The ancients taught that knowing when to be silent is a kind of strength. Others will observe and judge for themselves. This is a profound wisdom that one understands better the longer they live. In a world where everyone wants to speak, prove themselves, and assert themselves, knowing when to be silent becomes rare and precious. The ancients did not view silence as weakness, but rather as an expression of inner strength and self-confidence. People often talk a lot because they fear being misunderstood, underestimated, or not being recognized. Therefore, they hastily explain, defend themselves, and boast. But the ancients understood that the more one talks, the more easily one reveals an unstable mind. When the mind is unstable, words carry little weight. Silence at this time is not avoidance, but rather self-preservation and allowing time to speak for itself. Knowing when to be silent means knowing when to stop. A response isn't always necessary. Not every misunderstanding needs immediate explanation. When an honest person acts consistently, the truth will reveal itself. Others may be temporarily suspicious, but if there's nothing to hide, time will provide the answer. Ancient wisdom teaches that words only have value when they follow actions. If actions are insufficient and words precede them, the words become mere boasting. Conversely, when actions are sufficiently solid, silence becomes the most powerful evidence. Others will observe how you work, how you treat others, and how you uphold your principles. From there, they will judge you without you having to say anything. A person who constantly explains themselves often arouses suspicion. A person who remains calm and silent, on the other hand, prompts further reflection. The ancients recognized this, and therefore placed great importance on keeping one's mouth shut. This wasn't out of fear of saying something wrong, but because they understood that speaking doesn't always bring benefits. In relationships, knowing when to be silent helps avoid many unnecessary conflicts. When emotions are high, words can easily hurt. Silence at this time allows emotions to subside. Only when the heart is at peace do words have value. The ancients called this knowing when to wait. Silence is also a way to empower others to judge. When you don't rush to assert yourself, you give others space to observe, and when they draw their own conclusions, their beliefs will be much deeper than those formed by verbal persuasion. Naturally formed beliefs are always more enduring than those that are manipulated. The story of ancient merchants is a clear illustration of this wisdom. In the old days, there were merchants who weren't good at talking. They didn't pester customers. They didn't advertise loudly. Their stalls looked ordinary and unpretentious. But strangely, they were always crowded with customers. They don't stand at the door soliciting customers. They don't make sweet promises. They simply sell quietly at the right price. They weigh accurately. They don't cheat. They don't take advantage of customers' lack of knowledge. They sell to whoever wants to buy. They answer questions briefly and clearly. They don't pester those who don't buy. First-time customers might not be impressed, but once they buy something, they feel reassured. The price remains consistent. The quality is as advertised. No overcharging. No discrimination. They come back again. Then they tell their acquaintances about a very reputable place. No need for fancy words. Just honesty. Gradually, word spread. Not through advertising signs, but through word of mouth. Not through self-praise, but through customer experiences. The stall wasn't noisy, but there was always a crowd. The seller didn't talk much, but everyone trusted them. The ancients observed this and understood that silence at the right time builds credibility. Merchants don't need to boast about their credibility because their actions speak for themselves. They don't need to prove it because their customers are the ones who prove it. This is the power of silence combined with action. Conversely, salespeople who talk too much and advertise excessively often make customers suspicious. The better the words, the higher the expectations. When reality doesn't match the words, disappointment comes very quickly. The ancients taught that it's better to be overestimated than to elevate yourself only to fail to maintain that high standard. In modern life, this principle remains just as valid. A person who does good work doesn't need to constantly boast about their achievements. A person who lives a virtuous life doesn't need to frequently talk about their kindness. When you do it long enough, others will recognize it on their own. And that recognition is more enduring than any praise you give yourself. Knowing when to be silent also helps people avoid conflict. Many conflicts arise simply from verbal exchanges. When one side knows when to stop and remain silent, the conflict will have no ground to grow. Ancient people considered this to be the wisdom of someone who understands the situation. It's crucial to understand that silence doesn't mean resignation or weakness. Silence is a choice. It means knowing that speaking up at this moment isn't beneficial. It means believing that your value doesn't lie in speaking up all the time. Only those with inner strength dare to be silent. Only the weak need to speak constantly to prove themselves. When you are silent, others observe more closely. They notice how you react, how you work, and how you adhere to your principles. Every small action is noted. If you live righteously, silence will become the foundation for trust. If you live wrongly, no amount of talking can hide it. The ancients taught that silence is to save words for when they are needed. When you speak little, each word you utter will be heard. When you speak constantly, others become accustomed to your words and no longer pay attention. This is a very natural law of human nature. Winning hearts and minds doesn't require noise. It just requires steadfastness. When you don't interrupt, you create space for others. When you don't rush to explain, you demonstrate confidence. When you let your actions speak for themselves, you empower time to judge. If you're tired of talking too much to prove yourself, explain yourself, or defend your image. Try being silent at the right times. Focus on doing what's right, keeping your word, and living consistently. Then you'll feel lighter, and the people around you will gradually change for the better. If you find these philosophies help you understand more deeply the power of silence and how to live wisely among people, please subscribe to the Simple Philosophy channel. Each video is a story, a lesson that helps us be less noisy, but more steadfast on the path to becoming a better person. 10. Those who boast often lack substance. Those with solid foundations are usually quiet. This is a subtle observation by the ancients about the profound nature of human beings. The more experienced one becomes, the more one realizes that outward noise is often a sign of inner emptiness. Conversely, quiet serenity usually stems from a solid foundation. Ancient wisdom refers to the foundation as virtue. true ability, genuine experience, and self-understanding. A person with a solid foundation knows clearly who they are, where they stand, and their limitations. Once they understand this, they no longer feel the need to constantly prove themselves. They don't need to show off for recognition, because the most important recognition comes from inner strength and stability. People who constantly show off often stem from a sense of inadequacy. This could be a lack of self-confidence, experience, recognition, or security. When they feel inadequate internally, they try to compensate through words, images, and ostentation. Showing off isn't necessarily bad, but excessive showing off is often a sign of an unstable foundation. The ancients clearly understood this, which is why they always reminded people to cultivate their roots first, and then the branches will naturally flourish. If the roots are not strong, no matter how lush the branches and leaves are, they will easily break in a strong wind. In life, strong winds represent challenges, adversities, and times when true strength is needed. People with solid foundations are usually not in a hurry to show off. They know that any premature display carries risks. When the work is not yet done, but the words are spoken first, even a small mistake can ruin their reputation. Therefore, they choose to act first and speak later, or even remain silent after the work is completed. The quietness of those with roots is not coldness, but restraint. They understand that every time they speak, they are placing themselves in the gaze of others. When it's not necessary, they choose silence to conserve energy, maintain focus, and preserve depth. In relationships, boastful people often want others to see their value immediately. They talk about their achievements, connections, abilities, and possessions. But paradoxically, the more they boast, the more wary others become. Humans are inherently sensitive. They can sense when someone is trying to sell their image. Conversely, quiet people often pique others' curiosity. They don't talk much about themselves. They ask just enough questions, listen just enough, and respond calmly. Gradually, others realize that this person gets things done, says what needs to be said, and upholds principles. Trust is thus built naturally. Ancient wisdom teaches that those with a solid foundation fear no comparison. Those who boast often fear comparison because their inner strength may not be there. They need to show off to gain an advantage from the start. But those with a solid foundation don't mind the slow pace. They believe that when the time comes, true value will naturally emerge. In the workplace, boastful people often talk a lot about plans, visions, and grand ideas. But when it comes to actually doing the work, they lack perseverance and attention to detail. Those with a solid foundation, on the other hand, talk less about the distant future. They focus on the immediate task, doing it right, completely, and to the very end. The results are therefore clearer than any boasting. The ancients highly valued practicality, practical learning, practical work, practical living. Practical people don't need to show off because they know that showing off doesn't make them better. Only by continuing to work can the foundation grow stronger. Once the foundation is strong, branches and leaves will naturally grow without needing to be called. A very important point is that people with strong character are usually not caught up in proving themselves right. When there is a debate, they are not in a hurry to win or lose. They know that temporary right or wrong is not as important as maintaining their integrity in the long run. Therefore, they choose to remain silent or speak very briefly. This calmness often makes others pause and think. Those who boast are the opposite. They often want to win verbally, to overwhelm with logic, examples, and personal experiences. But the more they argue, the more their insecurity is revealed. Ancient wisdom suggests this is a sign of insufficient foundation, hence the fear of being shaken. In their personal lives, people with solid foundations tend to live simply. They don't need to show off their lifestyle, their views, or their morals. They do what is right in silence. When they help someone, they don't boast about it. When they suffer a loss, they don't complain. Not because they don't feel anything, but because they don't need to turn everything into a story about themselves. Ancient wisdom teaches that those with a solid foundation know contentment. When they know contentment, they don't need to show off. When they don't know contentment, they always feel a lack and constantly need to show off to fill that void. Showing off, therefore, is not just an action but a state of mind. The serenity of those with inner strength also stems from their understanding of the law of impermanence. Today they may be praised, tomorrow they may be criticized. Today they may be high, tomorrow they may be low. Because they understand this, they do not cling to praise nor fear criticism. They are serene because they are not overly swayed by external influences. Ancient people considered this a manifestation of inner strength. Inner strength is not noisy. Inner strength needs no stage. Inner strength is most clearly demonstrated when facing difficulties. At that time, those who like to show off often become disoriented, while those who are quiet stand firm. This is especially important in the journey of winning people's hearts. Those who boast easily make a good first impression, but find it difficult to retain people's affection in the long run. Those who are quiet may be looked down upon at first, but they gain respect over time. People's hearts are not sustained by ostentation, but by reliability. The ancients didn't teach people to completely hide themselves. They only reminded us to let our roots speak for themselves. When your roots are strong enough, you don't need to show off. When you don't show off, others will speak about you. And the words of others always carry more weight than your own words. Therefore, if you are on the path of self-improvement, practice silence before you practice speaking. Practice doing before you practice showing off. Strengthen your foundation a little more each day. At some point, you will realize that your silence has become a source of prestige, and that prestige is the most enduring way to win people's hearts. 11. Winning hearts and minds over the long term requires consistency, being unwavering and not changing sides for personal gain. This is a core principle that the ancients always emphasized when discussing how to be a good person and how to win people's hearts. People's hearts are not conquered by impulsive actions or fleeting promises. They only remain loyal to those who are stable and predictable. The ancients understood very well that people can accept those who are not yet competent, but it is very difficult to accept those who are inconsistent. Change due to circumstances is natural, but change for personal gain to the point of losing principles will cause trust to collapse. Once trust is lost, no amount of talking can restore it. Consistency is not rigidity. Consistency is upholding core values regardless of changing circumstances. The ancients called this maintaining morality. Those who uphold morality may be flexible in their methods, but they are not inconsistent in their standards. They know what can change and what absolutely cannot. Consistent people are not usually very conspicuous at first. They don't chase short-term opportunities. They don't change their attitude just because the other person is strong or weak. They treat superiors with appropriate respect and subordinates with appropriate kindness. This stability makes others feel secure in their presence. Ancient wisdom teaches that people are very sensitive to hypocrisy. A person who preaches righteousness today, but turns their back for personal gain tomorrow, will leave all those who trusted them feeling insecure. No matter how talented that person may be, it will be difficult to retain their support for long. Because no one wants to place their trust in someone who is unpredictable. Consistency is also demonstrated when words and actions go hand in hand. Someone who says one thing today and does another tomorrow will gradually lose patience. Initially, people might be understanding. Over time, suspicion will arise. Ultimately, they will leave in silence. Human nature often leaves quietly, but once gone, it's very difficult to return. Our ancestors therefore always taught their descendants to be cautious with every promise. If you don't promise, then don't promise at all. But once you've made a promise, you must see it through to the end. Keeping small promises lays the foundation for bigger ones. Even breaking a small promise can shatter years of accumulated trust. In long-term relationships, consistency creates a sense of security. People know that if you're a certain way today, you'll be almost the same tomorrow. There's no need to guess why your attitude might change. This sense of security is what makes others willing to commit. Conversely, those who change their demeanor for personal gain often create underlying tension. When around them, others must be wary, observant, and cautious. No matter how skillful they may be, their instability is still evident in the smallest details. Their eyes, voice, and behavior will all change when their interests shift. Human nature doesn't require much analysis. They sense it. The ancients taught that self-interest is the greatest test of character. When self-interest is not present, everyone is quick to speak flattering words. Only when self-interest appears do you know who can remain true to themselves. Those who betray others for personal gain often reap immediate benefits but lose people in the long run. Those who maintain consistency may take longer, but they go further. In the workplace, consistent individuals uphold their work principles, whether supervised or not. They don't break common standards for personal gain, nor do they shift responsibility to others under pressure. This is what makes them reliable and trustworthy. When important matters arise, they are the first people think of. Ancient people considered consistency to be a manifestation of inner strength. Inner strength comes from clearly understanding what one is pursuing. When the goal is clear enough, people will not be easily swayed by short-term gains. They know that each change of heart erodes one's reputation. Reputation erodes slowly, but once it is, it is difficult to restore. Consistency is even more important in family and friendships. Someone who is close today and distant tomorrow, simply because circumstances have changed, can hurt others. The ancients taught that the value of friendship lies in its enduring nature. It doesn't need to be passionate, but it needs to be long-lasting. It doesn't need to be talkative, but it needs to be consistent from beginning to end. Consistency is also a way to protect yourself. When you live clearly, it's harder for others to take advantage of you. They know you won't break your principles for personal gain, so it's not easy to put you in ambiguous situations. Consistent people rarely get into trouble because they don't leave any gaps in their way of life. The ancients didn't demand perfection. They simply reminded us to be the same person we were yesterday. We can improve a little each day, but we shouldn't betray ourselves. When you maintain that consistency, the hearts of those around you will gradually stabilize. One profound truth is that consistent people often don't need many strategies to win people over. Their very stability is a silent promise. Others know that if they choose to trust them, they won't be betrayed by erratic changes. Winning hearts and minds, therefore, lies not in skill but in character. Character is best demonstrated through long-term consistency, unwavering treatment of others, unwavering adherence to principles, and consistency even when no one is watching. Ancient people believed that time is the fairest observer. Those who live consistently will have time on their side. Those who waver for personal gain will soon be exposed by time. A person's heart can be deceived temporarily, but it cannot be deceived forever. Therefore, if you want to maintain people's loyalty in the long run, start by maintaining your own integrity. Don't let short-term gains change your attitude. Don't let temporary circumstances make you forget your principles. When you remain true to yourself, others will gradually feel secure and stay with you. 12. When faced with conflict, wise people choose to resolve it through action, rather than verbal argument. This is a profound principle of ancient wisdom in dealing with people and winning their hearts. Conflict is unavoidable in life, but how one confronts conflict is what best reveals their character. Most people, when suspected or misunderstood, instinctively want to explain themselves immediately. They fear being judged wrongly, losing credibility, or being taken advantage of. Therefore, they hastily argue, try to prove themselves right, and argue. But the ancients observed that the more they argue, the more likely the conflict is to escalate. Words spoken in the heat of emotion often lose their composure and easily hurt others. Wise people understand that arguments rarely solve the root of a problem. Arguments only reveal who speaks better, or whose reasoning is more compelling. But human hearts are not defined by logic, they are defined by trust. And trust doesn't come from words, but from consistent actions. Ancient wisdom teaches that when one's heart is pure, there is no need to rush to explain. When one's actions are right, time will speak for itself. The more hastily one argues, the more likely others are to suspect them of concealing something. Conversely, those who calmly continue with their work create a much stronger impact. Actions have an advantage that words do not. They cannot be excused. A right deed stands alone. It needs no explanation. It needs no embellishment. Everyone understands it. Anyone who observes it carefully will draw their own conclusions. Therefore, the ancients considered actions to be the most honest language. In conflict, wise people choose to take a step back in words but a step forward in actions. They don't try to win the argument. They focus on making the outcome better. When the outcome changes, people's perceptions will change as well. The story of the old team leader is a clear example of this wisdom. In a team, there was a leader responsible for assigning tasks. After some time, suspicions arose that he was biased and unfair. Rumors spread. Some questioned him directly. Others spoke behind his back. In that situation, if he had stepped forward to explain, the conflict would very likely have escalated. Each side had its own reasons. Each person had their own perspective. The more they talked, the more complicated things became. But this team leader chose a different path. He didn't explain. He didn't refute. He didn't try to prove he was right. Instead, he quietly took on the most difficult tasks, the jobs few wanted to do, the responsibilities that would easily lead to criticism if he failed. When problems arose, he was the first to handle them. When mistakes occurred, he accepted responsibility without shifting blame. Initially, some were skeptical, but over time, people began to observe. They saw that this person didn't shy away from work. He didn't choose the easy tasks for himself. He didn't use his position to shirk responsibility. When he achieved results, he didn't take credit. When under pressure, he didn't complain. Gradually, the results became apparent. The work progressed. Difficult tasks were resolved. The overall pressure eased. people began to reconsider their initial doubts. They wondered if this person was really as good as the rumors said. And it was at that moment that people's hearts began to unite. No excuses were offered, but trust was restored more powerfully than any explanation. The leader didn't win with logic. He won with responsibility. The ancients called this winning people over with virtue. This story illustrates that when conflict arises, what matters is not what is said, but what is done. Words only affect the ears. Actions affect the heart. The ears can be manipulated, but the heart is very difficult to deceive for long. A wise person understands that every conflict is a test. Focusing solely on protecting one's personal image can easily lead to a loss of overall credibility. However, if one dares to take on the difficult task, even if it means suffering immediate losses, it will ultimately earn the respect of others. The ancients taught that when the water is muddy, let time settle. Stirring it up only makes it muddier. In conflict, words are the stirring. Silent action is the process of settling. When everything has settled, the truth will become clear. This doesn't mean remaining silent in every situation. The ancients weren't extremists, but they emphasized that when words are ineffective or likely to cause harm, action is a safer and more sustainable path. In modern life, this principle remains just as valid. When misunderstood at work or in relationships, hastily arguing might win the argument but cost you the other person. If you are patient, do better, and maintain the right attitude, sooner or later your perspective will be restored. Those who uphold virtue are not afraid of temporary setbacks. Their greatest fear is losing their integrity simply to win an argument. They understand that an argument can be won in a single session, but character lasts a lifetime. Winning hearts and minds, therefore, doesn't lie in how much you say is right, but in how much you can shoulder. When conflicts arise, who takes responsibility? Who continues to work hard even without praise? Who maintains a stable attitude despite being suspected? Those things don't need to be said. Others will see it for themselves. And when they see it for themselves, the trust formed will be very deep. That's how wise people maintain their integrity and resolve conflicts. Not with words, but with actions. 13. The ancients said that those worthy of following don't need to boast. Those trustworthy don't need to prove themselves. This is a very short saying, but it contains profound wisdom about judging people and how to conduct oneself. The ancients didn't judge people by what they said about themselves, but by what they quietly did over a long period of time. In life, we often encounter people who introduce themselves as capable, ethical, and visionary. They talk a lot about their own worth, but the ancients warned against this. Because truly valuable people don't need to boast. They let others recognize their worth through their actions and results. A person worth following is someone who inspires others to want to follow them without being asked. This following isn't blind obedience, but voluntary. People only follow voluntarily when they feel secure and are guided by example, not slogans. Ancient people understood that self-praise is a sign of uncertainty. When a person constantly has to say they are good, right, and excellent, it means they lack inner strength to believe in themselves. They need external validation, but that validation is often fragile. Conversely, those worth following are usually very calm. They don't compete for leadership positions. They don't rush to assert themselves as the center of attention. They simply focus on doing what they are doing. When difficulties arise, they are the first to step forward. When success is achieved, they step back. It is this attitude that naturally makes others want to follow them. Ancient people considered this to be the allure of character. Character doesn't need to be advertised. Character radiates through every small action, through how one treats the vulnerable, through how one upholds principles when no one is watching, and through how one takes responsibility when mistakes occur. Trustworthy people are the same. They don't need to prove themselves verbally. They understand that trust isn't built in a single conversation, but through repeated observation. Each time they keep their word, it's a brick in the foundation of trust. Each time they break their promise, it's a crack that's hard to mend. The ancients taught that self-proving often backfires. When someone tries too hard to prove their trustworthiness, others will wonder why they're doing it. True trust doesn't need to be forced. It comes slowly, but once it does, it's very lasting. In long-term relationships, trustworthy people rarely talk about commitments. They don't make many promises. They also don't brag about the times they've helped someone. They take keeping their word for granted, not as an achievement to boast about. People who constantly try to prove themselves often talk a lot about morality, responsibility, and credibility. But when faced with difficult situations, they try to evade or explain themselves. This disconnect gradually erodes trust. Ancient wisdom recognizes this pattern and emphasizes that actions speak louder than words. In a group, truly worthy followers don't need many commands. They don't use titles to coerce. They lead by example. When they roll up their sleeves and tackle a difficult task, others will naturally feel compelled to follow. This follow-up doesn't come from pressure, but from respect. The ancients called this setting an example with one's own example. The mirror doesn't speak, but everyone who sees understands. When the leader lives in accordance with the principles of the group, they will self-regulate. When the leader is consistent, people will have fewer doubts. When the leader is humble, others will be more open to them. Trustworthy people also don't usually resort to verbal defense. When doubted, they don't rush to refute it. They continue living and working as usual. They believe that if they are honest, time will tell. This isn't passivity, but rather a deep-seated self-confidence. Ancient people believed that trust shouldn't be fought for. The more you fight, the more you lose. When you try to win trust over with words, you inadvertently show that you're afraid of losing it. Truly trustworthy people aren't afraid of being tested, because each test only makes them clearer. In their personal lives, truly virtuous people don't flaunt their moral views. They don't stand on a pedestal to judge. They live righteously, in silence. When someone is in trouble, they help to the best of their ability. When they can't help, they don't make empty promises. This very clarity builds trust. The ancients taught that you shouldn't label yourself. Let others name you. Self-proclaimed titles are often fleeting. Titles given by others carry weight. But earning such a title requires a great deal of time and perseverance. Those worth following aren't afraid of slowness. They understand that people's hearts can't be rushed. They don't seek to win people over immediately. They simply live each day to the fullest, a little bit at a time. When they look back at others, they realize they've been walking alongside them for quite some time. Ancient wisdom also emphasizes that trustworthy people don't need to build an image. They build habits. Images can change depending on circumstances, but habits reveal true character. Those who maintain good habits over a long period naturally become trustworthy. In modern society, where everyone can introduce themselves, promote themselves, and prove their worth, this ancient wisdom is all the more valuable. It reminds people to return to their roots, that there's no need to say who you are. Live in a way that allows others to feel who you are. Winning hearts and minds is therefore not the art of eloquent speech, but the art of living right. Those worthy of following don't need to proclaim themselves, because they know their place isn't determined by words. Those trustworthy don't need to prove themselves, because they understand that trust is built over time, not by logic. When you don't rush to claim credit, don't rush to assert yourself. Don't rush to prove anything. You give others space to observe. And when they observe and evaluate for themselves, their conclusions will be much deeper and more lasting. Ancient people believed that eventually, the human heart would find its way to a safe place. A place without noise or ostentation, only stability and consistency. Those who live like that will naturally attract followers. No need to call out, no need to speak. Just be yourself in silence. 14. The highest level of winning hearts is not trying to win them over. When virtue is sufficient, people will come naturally. This is the deepest crystallization of ancient wisdom on how to be a good person and how to live in the world. After all, the principles of keeping promises, maintaining virtue, maintaining consistency, and knowing when to remain silent, the ancients led people to a very tranquil state. That is, there is no longer the notion of having to conquer anyone. Most people, when it comes to winning hearts and minds, think about skills, how to speak, how to act, how to behave, how to influence. But the ancients looked deeper. They saw that as long as one is still trying to win someone over, the mind is not at peace. When the mind is not at peace, every action carries an ulterior motive. And when there is an ulterior motive, others will sooner or later sense it. The ancients taught that people's hearts are very sensitive. They may not express it verbally, but they can always sense who is treating them sincerely and who is treating them with ulterior motives. This difference is subtle, but it determines whether people stay or leave. Those who try to win people over are always calculating. Will saying this win their favor? Will doing that earn them points? Will helping this person benefit them in the long run? It is these silent questions that cause actions to lose their purity. When actions are no longer pure, no matter how skillful they are unlikely to last. Conversely, those who don't try to win people over are much more relaxed. They don't place much importance on being liked. They don't worry about whether or not they'll be recognized. They simply focus on living true to their values, doing what needs to be done, upholding what needs to be upheld, helping within their capabilities, refusing when they can't. Everything is clear. The ancients called this state sufficient virtue. Sufficient virtue is not about perfection, but about fullness in the heart. When the heart is full, a person no longer craves more from the outside. They don't need admiration to feel valuable. They don't need the pursuit of others to affirm their position. When a person is in that state, they exude a very special sense of peace. Being around them, others don't feel pressured, manipulated, or controlled. They only feel comfortable and at ease. And it is that very feeling that makes people want to get closer. The ancients taught that the human heart is like water. The more you try to hold on to it, the more it flows away. The more you let go, the more it gathers. When you don't try to hold on to someone, they will stay. When you don't try to pull someone in, they will come to you on their own. This is not a paradox, but a very natural law of the human heart. Virtuous people don't usually build an image. They don't try to be the center of attention. They don't need to be right in every conversation. They are willing to listen, willing to admit their mistakes, willing to step back when needed. But when it comes to important matters, they don't shy away from responsibility either. It is this naturalness that makes them trustworthy. Not because they want to be trusted, but because they don't create a sense of insecurity. When around them, others don't have to guess what they want. No need to be defensive. No need to be on guard. And people love places where there's no need to be defensive. Ancient people highly valued the concept of selflessness. Not seeking fame, not seeking profit, not seeking followers. But selflessness doesn't mean passivity or giving up. Selflessness means doing what is right without conditions, helping without expecting anything in return, living virtuously without needing recognition. When someone lives like that, they create a very strong force field. Others may not say it out loud, but they sense that stability. And when they face difficulties, they will think of this person. When they need emotional support, they will also turn to this person. Ancient people believed that human hearts always gravitate towards virtue, not because of any profound moral principles, but because they feel safe there. In a world full of turmoil, people desperately need stable anchors. A person of sufficient virtue is precisely such an anchor. What's remarkable is that those who reach this level often don't realize they're winning people's hearts. They don't have that concept. They simply live. And in the process of living, others naturally become attached to them without even noticing. This is the highest form of winning hearts. Winning hearts without needing to win them over. The ancients taught that the more you crave affection, the easier it is to lose yourself. When you dare to forego that affection, you preserve yourself. And when you preserve yourself, others will dare to trust and follow you. In modern life, this is even more valuable. While everyone is trying to build an image, exert influence, and create a personal brand, someone who tries nothing at all becomes very different. That difference isn't flashy, but it's profound. And it's that profoundness that sustains people's hearts for a long time. Virtuous people are not afraid of temporary loneliness. They understand that it's better to have few genuine people than many superficial ones. They don't rush to connect. They don't rush to become close friends. They let relationships develop naturally over time. And that's why those relationships are usually very lasting. The ancients said that flowers don't need to call bees. When the flower is fragrant enough, the bees will come on their own. It's the same with people. When you are strong, honest, and consistent enough, you don't need to call anyone. The right people will find you. The wrong people will leave, no matter how hard you try to keep them. Therefore, the highest level of winning hearts and minds does not lie in communication skills. It does not lie in relationship strategies. Rather, it lies in whether you have lived a fulfilling life, whether your virtue is sufficient to put others at ease, whether your heart is complete enough to not need to demand anything in return. When you stop asking how to get others to follow you, and instead ask whether you've lived right today, that's when you're very close to the state that the ancients spoke of. And when you truly reach that level, you'll find something very light. You'll realize that you don't notice when people's hearts are drawn to you. But when you look back, you'll realize that there are people around you who have stayed for a very long time. Not for personal gain, not for promises, simply because they feel safe and secure walking alongside you. Winning hearts and minds is not a technique. It's the natural result of a life lived with roots. Looking back at all the teachings of our ancestors, we see that there are no real tricks or strategies mentioned. No clever conversational techniques. No quick ways to win favor. There is only one path: self-cultivation and living a steadfast life. Wise people don't need to talk much. They let their actions speak for themselves. Words follow their deeds, and often don't even need to. When a person keeps their word in small things, does what's right, even when no one is watching, and adheres to principles even when it's advantageous to break them, a sense of security naturally forms around them. Others around them don't need to be wary, don't need to guess their intentions, and don't need to fear betrayal. The ancients understood very well that people's hearts are not lasting with cleverness. People's hearts are only lasting with certainty. Cleverness can make an impression, but certainty is what sustains it. A person who speaks well may gain attention for a while, but a person who lives consistently will be trusted for a lifetime. Maintaining virtue every day isn't about doing great things, but about not doing anything against your conscience in the smallest matters. Keeping your word isn't about making grand promises, but about doing what you say you'll do, even if no one reminds you or checks. Maintaining consistency isn't about being rigid, but about not changing your attitude for the sake of your own good. When you live like that, you won't need to think about winning anyone over. You won't need to calculate your words. You won't need to build an image. You won't need to prove your worth. You just need to live right, and live long enough. The ancients said that people's hearts are very discerning. They can be swayed by words for a moment, but they only stay with those who make them feel safe. Safe in words, safe in actions, safe in consistent treatment. This path isn't fast, but it's very enduring. At first, you might find yourself slower than others, less noticed, less praised. But over time, you'll realize that the relationships around you become deeper, fewer, but more genuine. And when things get tough, you won't be alone. Winning hearts and minds is therefore not something to be learned further. Rather, it's about living more deeply, living slowly enough to reflect on oneself, living mindfully enough not to chase after superficial glamour, living steadfastly enough not to turn one's back for personal gain. If you find these philosophies thought-provoking, please share this video with a friend you truly trust, and subscribe to the Simple Philosophy channel so we can continue our journey to living a deeper life each day.